Iran nuclear agreement. That kicks the issue back to Congress, which now has a 60-day window to make the next move. And though the United States did not actually walk away from the nuclear deal, the president is leaving that option on the table. So far, the move winning praise from our closest ally in the Middle East. Joining me right now is Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Mr. Prime Minister, it's wonderful to see you. Thanks so much for joining us this morning.
Good to be here with you.
You congratulated and commended the president's action on this deal. Why was it so important for President Trump to make this move?
Well, look, Iran is the foremost terrorist state of our time. It hangs gays, jails journalists, subjugates women, and foments terrorism throughout the world and wild aggression in the Middle East. To have a regime like this, whose economy is 30 times the size of North Korea, to have a rogue regime like that, acquire an arsenal of nuclear weapons in 10 years' time, which is what the Iran agreement now provides Iran to do, is a terrible folly. So I commend the president for taking a historic and bold decision to avert this danger in time. He could have kicked the can down the road. He could have said, it's not going to happen on my watch, so I'll just let it go. But he didn't. And he faced up to this danger, and I think he gave an opportunity for all of us in the Middle East and beyond to fix this deal. Fix it or nix it, because it could be very, very dangerous if it just went through.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned North Korea. I'm going to ask you about that in a moment. But the idea that he said fix it or nix it really surprised some people, that he left the door open to, look, if Congress can't come up with something, we'll walk away. Watch this, Mr. Prime Minister. I want to get your reaction to this as we examine these flaws in the deal.
I am directing my administration to work closely with Congress and our allies to address the deal's many serious flaws so that the Iranian regime can never threaten the world with nuclear weapons. In the event we are not able to reach a solution working with Congress and our allies, then the agreement will be terminated.
Mr. Prime Minister, would you rather see this deal terminated, or do you think they actually can amend these serious flaws that the president refers to?
I'm focused on the goal. The goal is to prevent Iran from ever acquiring nuclear weapons. And whether you could achieve it either by fixing this bad deal or by nixing it. I don't particularly care which one, but it's the result that we want to have. And there are several key things that you want to make sure. One is that you don't remove the restrictions on Iran's nuclear program just by changing the calendar. You want to see a real change in Iran's behavior. That's eliminating the so-called automatic sunset clause on restrictions. The second thing is prevent Iran from developing intercontinental ballistic missiles that are only useful for nuclear weapons. And you can do that. The third thing is equally is to see that you have real inspections. Right now, Iran doesn't allow you to inspect military sites. It lets you inspect everywhere else. Well, where do you think they're going to hide these things? So these are some of the key changes that have to go through. If you get it, fine. If you don't get it, cancel the deal.
Yeah, this is a really important point that you make, because Tom Cotton of Arkansas is now looking at some of these flaws as a way to come up with a bill to actually change this. And it is the sunset clauses, insufficient enforcement, and the silence on Iran's missile program. So do you think that they will actually be able to come up with an amendment that Iran will follow? I mean, do you really believe that we will be able to start viewing their facilities?
I think that what you have is immense leverage. People don't recognize that. You have immense leverage, and not only because Israel and the key Arab states in the region support what the president has done. You said Israel supports the president. Absolutely. But so do Saudi Arabia, so do the Emirates. And when Israel and the Arab states agree on something, you should pay attention. I think this is a historic moment. The leverage you have is based upon the fact that the United States is a great superpower. It's the world's greatest power. Its economy is nearly $20 trillion. The Iranian economy is 2% of that. So when various countries, including your allies, have to choose between crippling sanctions on Iran or cutting themselves out of the American market, well, it's a no-brainer what they'll choose. That's part of the leverage that you have. And the president is right to put that forward now and to say, I'm not going to authorize the continuation of a very bad deal that will give a rogue criminal state the powers to threaten the United States mainland. We've seen what happens when that goes through. I'm going to act now Again, fix it or nix it. Exactly the right thing to do.
But that's not what we're hearing from some of our partners on this deal, right? I mean, what are you going to do? What should the president be doing to work with the other 5 countries who are basically saying, look, we're fine just keeping this deal as is? I'm talking about Europe. I'm talking about China. So if the U.S. even puts snapback sanctions back in place, what does it really mean if the other countries involved in this deal are not agreeable?
Well, look, I think the reason they say they want to keep the deal is because they think that changing it would mean canceling it. But the president said something very astute. He said, well, unless you change it, I'm going to cancel it. So if you want to save the deal, start fixing it. And that's exactly the right. So it takes time until governments actually understand the significance of what the president put forward. But he has said, I, the president of the United States, will not allow this bad deal to go through. So the only way you guys can save the deal is by helping amend it, fixing it. And that's something that I think will have great leverage down the line.
So you do believe that
Maybe
Europe,
right now,
for example, will join in on perhaps potentially snapping back those sanctions against Iran then?
Well, I think if the U.S. decides to do that on its own, it can do so by its own because it has such immense economic leverage. And I think the Europeans, once they think about it, will see that the president is giving them an opportunity to avoid something that is very bad for them today. You know, you don't want, none of us as leaders should, sacrifice the long term or even the middle term for the short term. In the short term, yeah, it's comfortable. They have business ties with Iran and so on that are developing. But in a very few years, Iran will be this humongous power with declared, this is Iran that says death to America, death to Israel. You know, you're the great Satan, we're the little Satan. I suppose Europe in between is a middle-sized Satan. I hope they're not offended. But we're all under their guns. They're developing ballistic missiles, not to fire against us. They already have that. It's to fire against, to threaten Europe, to threaten the United States. So I think when people come around and think about it, they say, we really don't want this bad deal to go through. We really should act now to correct it.
The president also said, look, their favorite term is death to America, death to Israel. The president actually said that in the speech. Are you expecting Iran to take retaliatory action as a result of this move?
Against whom?
Against the U.S., against Israel, against anybody. I mean, are you expecting a reaction from the Iran Revolutionary Guard?
Well, I think I can speak as the Prime Minister of Israel. I think if they act against us, that would be a very big mistake.
Already we've heard rhetoric to that, calling any commentary against this deal stupid. I mean, a lot of commentary already coming out of Iran. Should the country be afraid? I mean, should we be worried that, in fact, this is going to stoke even more violence?
No, I think it's the opposite. I think it reveals Iran's, the pressure that Iran has come under. Up to now, they were living in heaven. I mean, the radicals who control Iran were enjoying a bonanza. They were getting money flowing in. It just began, by the way. $50 billion that they got in is just up front. But down the line, they'd get hundreds of billions of dollars with oil contracts, with projects and other things. And so all of a sudden, this bonanza has stopped. And now they're under pressure. And I think that's important. Look, I drew a red line in the UN against Iranian enrichment. And everybody said, wow, is that going to cause a problem? But in fact, Iran backed off. They never crossed that line because they know the power of crippling sanctions and other things that they would have to confront. So I would say right now the ones who are worried, who should be worried, is Iran, not the U.S.
The president also mentioned North Korea. You mentioned North Korea at the beginning of our conversation. He said, look, if you allow something to keep going on, it will only get worse. It will only get worse and more dangerous, as we've seen with North Korea. Do you believe Iran is working with North Korea on its missile program?
Well, it did in the past, for sure. There's no question about that. But I'd rather not discuss ongoing intelligence. I think the important thing is, you remember that when the deal with North Korea was signed in 1994, it was hailed as, it's just a breakthrough. North Korea's neighbors would be more secure. North Korea will stop the development of nuclear weapons, that turned out to be false. And in fact, the same celebratory words were said about the deal with Iran, including the fact that Iran would now join the community of nations. It's going to moderate its activity. But since the deal with Iran was signed, the nuclear deal was signed,
right,
Iran has been like a tiger unleashed from its cage, and it's not joining the community of nations, it's devouring nations left and right. So I think that standing up to, refusing to go along with a bad deal is a good thing, an important thing, even a historic thing. Certainly important for world peace.
And Mr. Prime Minister, real quick, we're about to speak with Stephen Mnuchin, the U.S. Treasury Secretary. And, of course, this deal gives the Treasury further a sanction opportunity against the Revolutionary Guard because of its support for terrorism. What do you want to see out of the U.S. Treasury right now?
That is a very important step, and I welcome it. We'd like to see it implemented, obviously, because the Revolutionary Guards are the main instrument of Iran's aggression throughout the Middle East. They're firing rockets from Yemen through their proxies that reach 700 kilometers right into the Riyadh in Saudi Arabia. They're trying to colonize Syria and turn it into a military base against Israel and against others. So Iran's aggression continues unabated and, in fact, fueled by the megabucks that they receive from this deal, and that's nothing compared to what they'll receive tomorrow unless we change course. Well, beginning those sanctions on the Revolutionary Guards is a very important first step.
You make an important point because the land grab has gotten bigger. Iran is in Syria. It is in Iraq. Mr. Prime Minister, thank you so much for your time this morning.
Thank you, Maria.
Congratulations to you on this dynamic economy of Israel, despite the challenges you face. We'll see you soon, sir.
It's a roaring tiger. Come and invest.